Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, so you've sent us some really interesting material this time, all focused on brokers' opinions of value, BOVs, right, in commercial real estate.
That's right, BOVs, or sometimes BPOs, broker price opinion.
Right, BPOs. And your goal, it seems, was pretty clear. You want to get under the hood, understand what a BOV actually is, how people use it, its upsides.
And its downsides, too, when it's maybe not the right tool.
Exactly. So that's what we're doing today. Our mission is basically to help you get smarter about property valuation in the commercial space.
We're looking at a blog piece from Allies Commercial Realty. Seems pretty helpful.
Yeah, it lays things out nicely. And the core idea that jumps out right away is this. A BOV is like a quicker, cheaper way to get a first read on a property's value.
Definitely quicker and cheaper than getting a full formal appraisal, which is a much heavier lift.
Okay, so let's unpack that. A BOV or BPO, it's an estimate.
An estimate, yeah. Done by a licensed commercial real estate broker, someone who's active in the market.
And they're not just guessing, right? The article says it's based on analysis.
No, not guessing. It's grounded in real stuff. They look at comparable sales, what similar properties nearby have actually sold for recently.
Right.
They look at rental trends, what's happening with leases, and they use their general feel for the local market conditions. Is it hot? Is it cooling off?
So it taps into that broker's street-level knowledge. And the big selling points seem to be speed and cost.
Huge factors. Think about it.
When do those become really critical? For who?
Well, for sellers, for instance. Maybe you want to get your property on the market, like now. You need a starting point for pricing.
Without waiting weeks for an appraisal.
Exactly. A BOV gives you that quick guidance, helps you set a competitive price faster, more agile.
Makes sense. And for investors, people looking to buy.
Similar idea, really. Imagine you're looking at a bunch of potential deals. A BOV is like a quick filter.
Right. Is this even in the ballpark?
Yeah. Does the rough value match your investment strategy? Is it worth spending more time and money on deeper due diligence? It's a preliminary check.
A go-no-go decision point, almost. The article also mentions lenders sometimes use them. How does that work?
Well, sometimes. For initial look at collateral, perhaps. Maybe before they triggered the full appraisal process.
So not for the final loan approval, but maybe early stages.
Yeah, kind of a preliminary assessment gives them a quick comfort level check on the asset's value versus the loan request.
Okay.
And there's another angle the article mentions, long-term strategy.
Oh, yeah, for property owners.
Right. If you own commercial property, getting DOVs done periodically can help you track how your assets are doing compared to the market.
See if the value is going up or...
Exactly. Helps you monitor performance, maybe spot opportunities to reposition or invest further down the line.
Interesting. So it's quite a versatile tool, it sounds like. Useful for different people in different ways. But the article is also really clear. A BOV is not the same as a formal appraisal. That seems crucial for you, the listener, to grasp.
Absolutely critical distinction. They serve different purposes and have different levels of rigor.
So let's dig into those differences. First up, who actually does the work? Who's qualified?
Okay, so a BOV, like we said, is done by a licensed real estate broker. Their edge comes from being active in the market day to day.
They see the deals, the leases.
They know the local economy, the trends. Now, a formal appraisal, that's done by a state-certified or licensed appraiser.
Different qualifications entirely.
Yes, and they operate under much stricter rules. Industry regulations, professional standards. It's a whole different ballgame.
Okay. And the purpose. Why would you get one versus the other?
That really depends on what you need the valuation for. The intended use is key.
So BOVs are for?
More the informal stuff, usually.
Right.
Setting a listing price, like we said. Doing an initial check on a property you might buy. Maybe some lease talks, early stage financing chats.
Getting a practical, quick estimate without breaking the bank.
Exactly. But a formal appraisal, that's when things get serious. You need something legally recognized, something defensible.
Like getting a mortgage.
Definitely for mortgage underwriting.
Yeah.
Also things like tax assessments, settling estates, legal disputes involving property value.
Anything official or regulatory.
Pretty much. Those situations demand the thoroughness and legal weight of a certified appraisal. A BOV just won't cut it there.
Right. So if lawyers or the tax authorities are involved, you need the appraisal. Got it. What about how they figure out the value? The methods.
Big differences there, too, reflecting that formality gap. A BOV relies a lot on the broker's market sense, recent comps, their insights.
More intuitive, maybe, based on experience?
There's certainly an element of that, yeah. Appraisals, though, follow very specific defined methodologies.
Like what?
Well, they almost always use the sales comparison approach looking at comps, but with really rigorous documented adjustments for differences between properties.
More detailed adjustments than a broker might make.
Generally, yes. They might also use the income approach, especially for properties that generate rent. Analyzing NOI, cap rates, very formulaic.
Net operating income, capitalization rate, standard investment metrics.
Right, and sometimes they'll use the cost approach, what it would cost to rebuild the property today, minus depreciation, plus the land value.
Okay.
And the absolute key thing for appraisals, they must comply with USPAP.
USPAP.
Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. It's the rule book. It dictates methodology, reporting, ethics, everything.
And BOVs don't have to follow USPAP.
Nope. That lack of a strict, legally mandated framework like USPAP is a core reason why BOVs aren't used for those formal, high-stakes situations. Appraisals are because of USPAP compliance.
That makes the legal and financial standing much clearer. BOVs are informal.
Great for internal decisions, guiding strategy.
But not legally binding, whereas appraisals
Are legally recognized.
Yeah.
Often required, actually, for major financial transactions or legal stuff. You can't, generally speaking, get a commercial mortgage with just a BOV.
Okay, that distinction is sharp. Now, the practical stuff for you listening, cost and time. Big differences there.
Oh, yeah. This is where BOVs shine, honestly. They're way more cost-effective.
It's cheaper.
Much cheaper. The research isn't as deep, less paperwork, no strict USPAP compliance overhead.
And faster, too.
Much faster. You can get a BOV back in a few days sometimes. An appraisal, you're usually looking at several weeks. There's just a lot more detailed work involved.
So if you need a quick read and cost is a factor,
A BOV is very attractive, especially for that initial look by sellers or investors.
okay. So BOV wins on speed and cost. Appraisal wins on legal weight, depth, and standardization. Makes sense.
That's a good summary.
All right, let's say you've decided a BOV fits your needs right now. What actually happens? How does the broker figure out the number? What's the process?
The article lays out about 4 key steps. It typically starts with step 1, a property inspection.
Boots on the ground.
Exactly. The broker goes to the property, they check its condition, the layout, any unique features. They'll also look at zoning, potential legal issues, maybe spot-needed repairs or possible upgrades.
So it's not just numbers on a page, they actually see the asset.
Right. That physical assessment gives crucial context. Then step 2 is the market comparison and looking at historical sales.
The comps.
The comps, yeah. This is where they dig into the data. Find recent sales and leases of similar properties, size, type, location.
Nearby stuff.
Preferably, yeah. And they might also look at the subject property sales history, if it's available. See how its value has tracked over time. Helps establish a likely price range based on what the market's actually doing.
Okay, looking back to look forward. And if it's a property that makes money, like an apartment building or a shopping center.
Then step 3 comes in. Income, potential valuation. Critical for those types.
What do they look at there?
The financials. Current rents, occupancy rates, how full is it, what are the operating expenses? They might use metrics like the cap rate.
Capitalization rate. Value based on income.
Right. Or the gross rent multiplier, the GRM, comparing price to gross rents. These tools help value the property based on its cash flow.
Key stuff for investors, obviously.
Absolutely. And then finally, step 4 is putting it all in context.
Context.
Yeah, considering the current market conditions. You can't value in a vacuum, right?
True.
So they factor in broader economic things like interest rates, but also very local stuff. What's the demand like for this type of property in this specific area right now?
Like, is industrial space suddenly hot in this neighborhood?
Exactly. A good BOV should reflect those immediate local market dynamics, sometimes even before they show up in wider reports. It ensures the value isn't stale.
Okay, so it's a mix. Physical check, market data, income analysis if relevant, and the current market vibe.
That's a good way to put it.
So after all that work, what does the actual BOV report look like? If you get one, what information should be inside?
A good BOV report, like the one the article describes, is pretty comprehensive, actually. It usually starts with a detailed property description.
The basic.
Yeah, address, property type, office, retail, industrial, whatever size, both the lot and the building, layout, zoning, what it can be used for, any special features, its general condition, really paints a clear picture of the asset being valued.
Sets the stage. What comes next?
Usually an analysis of the market and local conditions. This part talks about current trends affecting values in that area.
Supply and demand.
Yep, supply and demand dynamics, vacancy rates, rental trends, super important for income properties, and maybe a general outlook for the market there. Sometimes it might even flag specific investment risks for that location.
Okay, so the bigger picture surrounding the property, then presumably the core valuation data.
Exactly. The comparable sales and lease analysis is central. It'll list recent sale prices of properties the broker thinks are similar.
The comps again.
Right. And lease rates and occupancy for similar properties too. But importantly, a good report won't just list them. It'll show the adjustments made.
Adjustments. Why?
Because no two properties are identical, right? So the broker has to adjust the price of a comp up or down to account for differences. Maybe the comp is newer or bigger or in a slightly better spot or has fewer amenities.
To make it a more apples-to-apples comparison with your property.
Precisely. Seeing those adjustments helps you understand how they arrived at the value from the comps.
That transparency seems important. What else is in there? Pictures?
Should be. Visuals and supporting data are key. Good photos of the property, aerial maps, maybe site plans or floor plans.
Helps you visualize it.
Definitely. And sometimes charts or tables showing market data, pricing trends. It just makes the whole thing clearer and adds credibility.
Makes sense. Now, we talked about the different ways to value property sales comparison, income, cost approaches. Do those show up in the BOV report?
They should, yeah. Maybe not with the same exhaustive detail as a full appraisal, but the report should indicate which methods the broker relied on most.
So it might say primary reliance on sales comparison.
Something like that. It might show the key adjusted comps for the sales comparison approach. If the income approach was important, it might mention the cap rate they used and the calculated value.
And the cost approach.
Less common in BOVs, unless it's a unique property, but it might briefly mention replacement cost minus depreciation plus land value if that was considered. The main point is, the broker uses one or more of these standard valuation principles.
Okay, so the underlying logic is there, even if it's less detailed than an appraisal. And the final answer, the price.
Well, you get the estimated property value. Often it's presented as a range, not a single sharp number.
A range, why?
It just acknowledges that it is an opinion, an estimate. There's always a bit of wiggle room. It reflects the market realities better sometimes.
Okay, a likely value range. And is that it?
Not quite. A really valuable part is the broker's insights and recommendations. This is where their expertise really comes through for you.
Like what kind of insights? If you're selling, they might suggest a specific listing price. They could offer strategies on marketing or maybe suggest fixes or upgrades to boost the value.
Practical advice.
Very practical. They'll also comment on how the property fits in the current market and, importantly, give you their take on the risks and opportunities tied to that specific property. It really helps you make informed decisions based on their opinion.
It sounds like much more than just a number then. It's the number plus context and advice.
A good one should be, yes.
Okay, so now we know what's in a BOV. Let's talk about putting them to work. How are people actually using these in the commercial real estate world? Real-world applications.
The article gives some good examples. We touched on one already. Setting realistic pricing expectations for sellers.
Using that data-driven evaluation to price it right from the start.
Exactly. Avoid being way too high and scaring buyers off, or too low and leaving money on the table. Strategic positioning.
Makes sense. What about for the buyers, the investors?
It's about guiding investment and acquisition decisions, using the BOV to check if a property's current market value makes sense for them.
Does it fit the strategy? Is it potentially a good deal?
Right. Maybe identify something undervalued or a property with good potential yield that fits their financial goals. It's that initial value check. For instance, maybe market data hasn't caught up with a recent local boom, but the broker's BOV reflects it, highlighting an opportunity.
So, useful for both sides before a deal even happens. What about during the deal? Negotiations.
Absolutely. A BOV can be a really useful negotiation tool.
How so?
Because it brings objective data to the table. You can point to the comparable sales, the market trends, the property's performance metrics discussed in the BOV to justify your price.
Whether you're buying or selling or even leasing.
Yes. It helps ground the discussion in facts, not just, I think it's worth X. It can help bridge gaps between parties and make the negotiation smoother. Less arguing, more data.
Take some of the emotion out, maybe. We also mentioned lenders, facilitating loan and financing decisions.
Yeah, providing that quick preliminary valuation can help speed things up on the lender's side, at least initially. Gets the ball rolling while they decide if a full appraisal is needed later.
A preliminary green light, potentially.
Could be. And it's not just for one-off deals either. The article mentions monitoring portfolio performance.
For people who own multiple properties.
Exactly. Getting periodic BOVs lets them track how their assets are doing relative to the market over time. Are values holding? Increasing, decreasing.
Helps them manage their overall portfolio.
Right. Make strategic tweaks, decide where to invest more, maybe where to divest. It's ongoing asset management.
Okay, so lots of practical uses. But like any tool, it's not perfect. It's really important for you to know the limitations, right? What are the main drawbacks of relying only on a BOV?
Super important point. BOVs are useful, but they're not a magic bullet. A big limitation is the subjectivity of opinions.
Meaning?
Well, it is a broker's opinion. It's influenced by their personal views, their specific experience, how they read the market data.
So different brokers might see it differently?
They definitely can. One broker might be more optimistic about the market than another, leading to slightly different values. There's potential for values to be a bit high or a bit low based on that individual perspective. It's not standardized like an appraisal aims to be.
Okay, that subjectivity is key,
Right.
and it's legal power, or lack thereof.
Right. As we said, it's not legally binding, period.
Can't take it to court as definitive proof of value.
Nope. Can't use it for official tax assessments where a certified value is needed. It just doesn't have that legal authority. If you need something legally defensible, you must get a certified appraisal. Imagine a property dispute in court. The BOV might be interesting background, but it won't be the official valuation evidence.
Clear line there. What about the depth of the analysis?
That's another limitation.
Yeah.
The limited scope. BOVs are designed for quicker preliminary assessments.
Not the deep dive in appraisal offers.
Exactly. They don't involve the same level of exhaustive research, super detailed analysis, or extensive documentation that you get with a full appraisal.
So for big financing deals, complex legal stuff, detailed tax issues.
A BOV just isn't comprehensive enough. It won't meet the requirements for those more demanding situations.
And you mentioned earlier, different brokers might come up with different numbers for the same property.
Yes, the potential for discrepancies in BOV assessments is real. It comes back to that subjectivity and the lack of strict, uniform standards like U.S. PAP for appraisals.
So one broker might emphasize certain comps, another might weigh market conditions differently.
Exactly. So if you got BOVs from two different brokers on the same property, you could reasonably expect slightly different valuation ranges. It's just the nature of it being an informed opinion rather than a rigidly standardized process.
So you need to remember it's an informed opinion, and opinions can vary.
That's the key takeaway on limitations.
Well, this has been incredibly helpful, a real deep dive into brokers' opinions of value. Let's try and sum it up for you. It really sounds like a BOV is a very handy tool, great for getting a quick, affordable sense of a commercial property's value in the current market.
Absolutely. Yeah. Big advantages in speed and cost compared to a full appraisal, no question.
And really useful for sellers setting that initial price, right? Or for investors doing that first pass on potential deals.
Yeah, and even as a tool in negotiations, bringing some market data into the conversation.
Definitely, but, and this is a big but, you absolutely have to remember the limitations we just discussed.
Crucial. That subjectivity factor, it is an opinion. The fact that it's not legally binding for things like court or taxes.
And that different brokers might give you different numbers. These aren't minor points.
Not at all. Understanding when a BOV is good enough for your needs and when you absolutely must step up to the rigor and legal standing of a formal appraisal. That's vital.
That's the key to making smart decisions in commercial real estate.
Precisely. Knowing which tool to use for which job.
Which brings us perfectly to our final thought for you today. Thinking about this trade-off, the speed and cost saving of a BOV versus the detailed analysis and legal weight of an appraisal when, in your specific situation, might the insights from a BOV be sufficient for you to act? And conversely, when a firm is settling for anything less than a full formal appraisal, simply not an option for achieving your goals in the complex world of commercial real estate. Something to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us. Get in touch with Allies Commercial Realty at info@alliescommercialrealty.com to find your ally in commercial real estate.